They talked like they were arranging a weather forecast, not a crime. I was at the sink when their voices floated in. The kitchen window was cracked for the September air. I like that breeze in the afternoon. It makes the house smell less like old days and more like pine and dust. It also carried his voice, my son's. And the woman he married. The one who learned how to steer him. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. But when your child stands 10 feet from your open window and speaks as if you were already gone, you listen. She won't move willingly, she said. She refuses to sign, so we'll make sure she has nowhere to stay. No roof, no lights, no option. Then my son, my only child, said the thing that sank into my bones, set her house on fire. She'll have nowhere to go. I didn't do anything at once. The mug in my hand was warm. Earl Grey, 2 sugars, the ritual I keep at 3 every afternoon. I watched the steam curl and looked for meaning in it. None came. I didn't cry. I made a tuna melt, sat in my recliner with the television murmuring a cooking show I didn't care about. My mind was on the metal box beneath my bed, fireproof heavy where I tucked important papers, the deed insurance forms, the will I filed after Henry died, all of it in my name. No co-owners, no signatures besides mine. They had no idea. They still saw me as the woman who needs help with online passwords and printing. They forgot I helped lay the foundation for this house back in '72, that Henry and I built it with our own hands. They forgot I know how to hide things that matter. The next morning I pulled everything out and spread it on the table like a hand of cards. Some papers were yellowed from the '80s, others stamped last year, including an insurance policy with full coverage for fire and a rebuild clause they wouldn't bother to read. Anger sat beside something colder, a precise, calculating betrayal. You don't shout when your son plots to erase your life, you plan. That afternoon I walked into town and asked quiet, casual questions about contractors. Not to hire, just to know names and numbers, to have options. I told them I was thinking of sprucing the place up if the Lord granted me a few more years. They smiled and handed me cards. I put one in my wallet. I bought a new fire extinguisher too, not because I trusted anyone, but because it would look right in a later report. I thought of everything. That evening my son came over, as unconcerned as if he'd never been caught plotting. He asked about my knee, if the stairs were getting harder, and held out a glossy brochure for a care place on the east side of town. I smiled and said I'd think about it. He didn't know I'd phoned the fire department to check response times. He didn't know I had changed the batteries in every smoke alarm. He didn't know I was ready. Let them come. They think a blaze will leave me destitute. What they don't see is that I've survived worse than flames. If ashes come, I'll still hold the policy. He used to call me Mama, burying his face against my shoulder after a nightmare or a bad math test. Even when he grew embarrassed and shortened it to Mom. There were times he still melted into that old name. Now it drops flat like a label left behind. He returned the next night with the same polite tone and a plastic container of 2 salty soup, a token, not a meal. He set it on the counter and began the script again. It's a lot for one person, he said, wandering through rooms he had inhabited for years like a stranger. The property is too big, we can help. We can move you somewhere smaller, safer. We can sell the place. The cadence was practiced. I heard the other woman's voice shaping it. I never call her my daughter-in-law. She hasn't earned it. He suggested a facility like it was kindness, forgetting how he stood outside my window just 2 nights before and talked about leaving me without a roof. I opened the back door and let the late sun fall across the porch and the garden and the line of trees. The air smelled of dry leaves and old light. This house is what I have left, I told him. Your father and I built it from nothing. We dug post holes ourselves, painted every board. We slept on the floor when the bedroom flooded that first winter. We burned sticks and newspapers when the oil ran out. We ate potatoes until we learned to pretend it was a delicacy. You were 6 when we moved in. You don't remember the hard parts because you were small. He tried the same lines we're trying to help. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Help. Tell your wife to stop meeting with developers in private. Tell her to stop redirecting mail, making bank calls I didn't authorize. Tell her about zoning inquiries and the little things that add up. He shifted, then denied it. I told him the deed was clean. I had checked with the county registrar. No lions. No addendums. Still in my name. I told him I had already spoken to an attorney and that my affairs were in order. His expression dropped then tightened like a mask. "You're making this ugly," he said. "No," I said. "I'm keeping it honest." He left without goodbye. I locked the door, poured another cup of tea, and settled again with the steady rhythm of my own breath. Let them push. Let them imagine that a casserole or a polished brochure will unseat me. I have lived through grief and small cruelties, and the long dismissal of being underestimated. I am not someone you remove with a smile in a plastic container. I am not their fragile stereotype anymore. Sometimes the truth slips in soft, not a thunderclap but a small, precise whisper across a teacup between polite sentences, the kind of look that tells you they've underestimated you. Her name was Sandra. 27, kind eyes, dark hair twisted into a tidy bun that softened her features. She wasn't employed as my nurse in any formal sense, just a care worker the agency sent twice a week, though I had never asked for one. Medicare's maze, I suppose. She'd bring groceries on occasion or help me manage prescription refills. Sweet, unassuming, always knocking before opening a cupboard. That morning she arrived with a paper bag and a tentative smile. "You all right, Mrs. Harper?" she asked, setting milk and eggs on the counter. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine, love," I said. "Just tired of being underestimated." She laughed nervously, unsure what to make of it, and I didn't bother to unpack the thought. I put the kettle on. We sat at the little table by the window, the same table that used to hold Henry's ashtray and the crossword pages he never finished. Sandra produced her tablet to log the agency checklist: mobility, appetite, mood. "Everything's steady," I said. "I'm still making my own tea, baking when I feel like it." She tapped, asked if I'd had any family visitors. "Just my son," I answered. "That's good," she said, then hesitated, as if deciding how much a stranger should tell. She looked up at me. I met her gaze. A few quiet seconds passed. "I probably shouldn't say anything," she began, lowering her voice, "but I also do some weekend work for private clients." I encouraged her with a nod. "Last Sunday I was at a house up by Ridge View. Big. Very modern. The woman there turned out to be your daughter-in-law's cousin. Whole family was there. They were talking about you loud enough not to care who heard." She shifted, embarrassed. "They mentioned permits, construction schedules. Said things like, 'After we close on the land, and she'll be in a home by Christmas.' They talked as if your house was already theirs." She met my face. I didn't want to pry, but I thought you should know. I reached and squeezed her hand. "Thank you, dear. You did right to tell me." She blinked, surprised I wasn't stunned. "No," I said slowly. "I smelled smoke already. You just told me where it's coming from." We finished our tea in a companionable hush. She lingered a little, folding bags and asking if I needed anything else. I could see she wanted to say more but held back. When she left, I sat staring at the circular stain Henry's mug left on the varnish, thinking about the patio she described. The laughter, the wine, the toast they'd already rehearsed. I stood and opened the hall closet, pulling down the old wooden box marked private. Inside were things people forget to remember: tax receipts, the 1971 land survey, Henry's hand-drawn plans for the garage we never built. Under those sat two crucial items: the updated insurance policy, my name alone, and a stamped legal letter dated 6 months earlier. "To whom it may concern, Mrs. Mary Jean Harper retains full ownership of the property at 18 South Boone Street. No transfer or co-ownership rights have been granted." They had assumed I was the vague, sweet old woman who smiled and forgot dates. They didn't know I'd taken every step to protect what Henry and I built. They didn't know I had everything I needed to foil their quiet plans without striking a match. And if a blaze arrived anyway, I was prepared. A photograph on the hallway wall caught my eye. The day we moved in, Henry and I, 25, me holding a hammer sunburn on my shoulders, grinning. The frame behind us was raw wood. The lawn was all rocks and promise. We didn't have much then, but we had land and a stubborn belief. I passed the picture on my way to the bedroom and paused, not to admire myself, but to remember who I was before being reduced to a role. Back then I had a name beyond mother or grandmother: Mary Jean Harper. I mixed concrete with bare hands, tiled floors in summer heat, pulled weeds until my palms split. I wasn't loud because I didn't need to be. My work spoke. That night I sat on the bed and emptied the box again, spreading documents like quilt patches across the comforter. Receipts, permits, maps. Years of deliberate paperwork forming a pattern. They assumed I signed whatever was placed before me. They were wrong. The deed was clean. I'd checked it twice. The insurance covered accidental damage and vandalism. The will, revised in January, named no immediate family. Everything would go to a charity I chose that builds homes for women starting over. Let them whisper about retirement homes and red tape. They didn't know half of what I had prepared. The next morning I climbed to the attic. The air up there always smells like cardboard and sun-warmed beams. Henry's old military chest sat under the rafters. Inside, past uniforms and letters, I found a lockbox labeled in his blocky handwriting, "Do not throw out. Use if needed." Within were a USB drive, a stack of faded receipts, and a worn leather notebook. At the kitchen table I opened Henry's notebook. His final years had been quiet, full of small projects and slow thoughts. The first page began, "If you're reading this, something's gone wrong. Trust no one who treats you like a duty." The entries detailed home improvements, property, line sketches, even a copy of the well permit from 1983. The last note, scrawled in his steady hand, read, "Keep the house no matter what. They'll come for it when you seem too tired to care." By lunchtime I had assembled a folder: insurance, deed, survey maps, Henry's notebook. I took it to Miss Travers, my lawyer, a reserved woman who never wasted words. She didn't ask why. She just filed copies and promised to notarize a letter confirming my intent and competence. "Have you been pressured?" she asked succinctly. "Yes," I said. "Do you feel in danger?" "Not yet," I replied, "but I expect it." She nodded, took the documents, and said she'd lodge both digital and physical records today. On the way home I stopped for lemons, flour, and heavy cream. That evening I baked a pie, partly to keep my hands occupied, partly because some things are best defended with sweetness. A quiet woman is not necessarily an unseeing one, not in this house, not ever again. When I visited the county clerk's office to confirm titles, the clerk looked as if I'd asked for Shakespeare backwards. "You filed a copy of the title here, Mrs. Harper," he repeated. "Yes," I said, the same calm voice I'd used at the table that morning. In 2007, after Henry passed, I went down to the records office myself with the original deed tucked in my folder. The clerk frowned, fingers tapping a keyboard with the blank patience of someone who expected nothing remarkable. I stood at the counter in my sensible blouse and soft shoes, gripping the folder so tight my knuckles ached. People shuffled behind me, coughs and paper rustles filled the room. I wasn't leaving until I had an answer. He scrolled, frowned deeper. "We have the parcel number, the tax history, but there's no scanned title showing an owner," he said finally. "The owner field is empty." My stomach dropped like I'd missed the last step on a stair. "Can I see the file?" I asked. He turned the monitor toward me. The parcel was there, assessment data, zoning notes. But where my name should have been, only a faint line remained, nothing typed in. "I don't understand," I murmured. "It was here. I remember the woman who notarized it." He nodded and explained how records were first scanned to disks before being uploaded. If a disk was corrupted, the transfer could fail. "Temporarily lost," he offered. "We'll keep the paper copies in storage. Turnaround 2 to 3 weeks, depending on volume." With 2 to 3 weeks. Plenty of time for someone bent on erasure to act as if I had no legal claim. I left without a word, the sun outside a hard, accusing light. My shoes pinched, every step feeling wrong. I drove home with the engine humming and the radio off, my thoughts a quiet, rising fear. Something had been taken, or vanished, and I didn't know who was pulling at the seams. At home I shut the door behind me, drew the blinds, and opened the drawer where I kept the private things. The copy I had kept was not the original anymore. Holding it up to the window, I saw faint, smudged ink where a seal should have been, a photocopy, a facsimile, not the notarized paper I remembered signing. The truth sank in slow and cold. This was theft, not clerical error. Someone had been in my house. Someone who knew where the spare key was, or had one of their own. My son and his wife flashed through my mind like a photograph, pulled too quickly from a darkroom. The thought didn't crack me with betrayal so much as it confirmed an edge I'd suspected. I made tea, hands steady though my breath kept catching. First thing in the morning, I would call Miss Travers. We'd file an affidavit of ownership, attach certified copies to the county record, notify the insurance company and the bank, and change every lock on the property, all of them, including the one on the back door he'd installed last year, for security. This was no longer only about paper. It was about someone trying to wipe me out from the map of my own life before a match ever touched the shingles. This house knew me better than anyone. There's a thin patch in the upstairs carpet at the top of the stairs where the threads are nearly bare. I used to catch my toe on it while carrying laundry, and Henry would joke that the house had a way of hanging on to people. The scuffed baseboards tell stories. The year we rescued a mangy mutt, the chipped tile by the stove from the day a cast iron pan slipped out of my hands, the faded paint marks on the garage where I attempted to roller skate at 50, laughing at my own foolishness. Every nick and worn edge is a memory, every memory another reason I won't be swept aside. That morning I went back to the county office, armed this time with copies of every document I owned and one decisive phone number tucked in my wallet. Miss Travers had warned me, they'll slow you. They'll point to paperwork. Make it look like your fault. You've got to make them see it differently, she had said. The clerk at the window was different now, younger, with cropped red hair and nails too long for fast typing. I'm here about parcel 421B, I said. Ownership record. You were here a few days ago, she said. Yes, I replied, sliding across notarized affidavits, scanned copies, and a crisp notice. I'd asked Miss Travers to draft a formal notification of a suspected fraudulent transfer request. Her expression shifted from routine disinterest to focused attention. You're accusing, she began. I'm not accusing. I'm stating the facts. I told her to check the request logs. You'll find an inquiry filed under my son's name, claiming to act as representative. She typed, frowned, and then there it was, a flagged attempt to produce transfer documentation dated 2 weeks earlier. My pulse thudded in my throat. I kept my voice even. I need a certified correction filed today, and I'd like to meet with your supervisor. She went to fetch a stamp and a supervisor, and within the hour I walked out with stamped corrections in hand. Copies went to Miss Travers, the bank, and into the safe that once held Henry's bandana. That afternoon I called a locksmith and had every exterior lock replaced. The young man who did the work smelled faintly of cigarettes and sawdust and took his shoes off without being asked. Someone tried to break in? He asked, as if it might be a domestic accident. No, I said. Someone's been trying to make me disappear. He laughed, thinking I was being dramatic. I didn't smile. Not long after, they came to my door like salesmen offering convenience. She carried a tray of bakery cookies and wore that beige cardigan people choose when they want to seem harmless. It did nothing to soften the purpose behind her visit. My son stood back, hands folded, eyes lowered. Mary Jean, she said, setting the cookies down as if placing a peace offering. We thought we'd drop by. We've been worried about you. Her voice was syrup smooth. The market's strong right now. Developers are paying well for lots out this way. We thought maybe you'd consider something easier. A smaller place. Less upkeep. We can help you sell. We'll make sure you're comfortable. My hands rested in my lap, old and steady. She slid a slim folder across the table, official, looking, edges sharp. This is just a preliminary agreement, she added. Nothing binding. It would let us manage the sale for you, and you'd receive a fair share. We've already spoken with a few people. He had been waiting for the right moment to say it. I turned toward him. Have you? His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Mom, we just thought it would be best to talk to you together, so you'd understand all the choices. I picked up the folder, opened it, and skimmed the first page. My name wasn't there at all, just a line about authorized family representatives. No signature block for me. No mention of me as the rightful owner. They hadn't come to suggest. They'd come to take. I set it down without shaking. Tell me, I said quietly, was the house supposed to catch fire before the paperwork or after? Her face went pale. His too. Excuse me, she whispered, her voice thin. I heard you, I said. Right outside this window the night you thought I was asleep. Burn her house down. She'll have nowhere left to go. He stepped forward. Mom, that was. I'm not done. I cut him off, calm but sharp enough to stop him cold. Since that night, I've recorded every meeting, filed a legal affidavit of ownership, replaced the locks, notified the police. And now you sit here, serving me threats in a porcelain teacup, expecting me to mistake it for kindness. She rose suddenly, her expression twisting. You're being irrational. No, I said evenly. I'm being exact. You're ruining everything, she snapped. This could have been done with dignity. No, I said again. It would have been theft dressed up as courtesy. They stared, stunned. I'd like you both to leave now. I stood, my knees aching but my back straight. For a second, my son truly looked at me, saw me. Shame flickered across his face, fear too, the ghost of the boy I once raised. But he turned, silent, and walked out. She followed, stiff and furious. When the door shut, I locked it. Then I hung the little sign Henry, once used when he napped on Sundays, "Do not disturb." It wasn't a joke anymore. It was a warning. That night, I didn't sleep, not from fear, but from something sharper. Resolve. I sat at the kitchen window until nearly 2 a.m., listening to the wind. The storm door Henry had crafted years ago creaking, slamming once. The silence in the house was different than grief. It was the tense hush before a storm breaks. Then I heard the low growl of an engine. My son's truck idling across the street with its lights off. He didn't get out. Just sat there watching, my breath caught, not in panic but disbelief. My own child, lurking outside like a stranger. I flipped the porch light on, bright as a bullet. The truck rolled away. By dawn I'd made 2 calls, one to the sheriff's deputy I'd known since he was a boy, asking him to log the threats and strange behavior. The second to Walt, an old friend of Henry's who now installed security cameras. By lunch, my home was surrounded with hidden eyes, motion sensitive, feeding straight to my phone. That night the smell came first. Faint but sharp, like a struck match. Then a crack, wood snapping. I found smoke curling up from beneath the porch steps. Thin, deliberate, not natural. No flames yet, but enough to know someone had tried to send a message. I turned the hose on steady, watching the steam vanish into the night. They weren't burning the house down, not yet, just warning me. Next time we won't miss. But they already had. Because fear didn't reach me. What reached me was clarity. The camera above blinked red, recording everything. When the deputy arrived, I was waiting with clean clothes and a USB drive. The footage showed a hooded figure crouching with a lighter, fumbling, then leaving. The profile was familiar, too familiar. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "Just log it. Make it known I'm not alone." After he left, I stood in the doorway and realized they thought fear would break me. They thought silence would erase me. But I had documentation, security, insurance, and one dangerous advantage: nothing left to lose. The fire never touched the walls, but something in me had caught flame. At first light, I was already dressed, folder in hand. By 8:01 a.m., I was on the phone with my insurance agent, Martha, who had handled every claim for years. "There was an incident," I told her. "No damage, but intent." She didn't ask if I was all right. She already knew the answer. Martha wasn't the type to overlook details. She asked for the case number and the exact time. When I finished, she paused before speaking again. "You remember," she said slowly, "your plan includes full rebuild protection. If the house is destroyed, even by arson, the coverage extends to the structure, contents, and temporary housing, calculated at market value, not depreciation." "I remember," I said. "You insisted I keep that clause when we revised it." "I did," she nodded. "And I'm relieved you listened." "So am I." Another pause. "Should I initiate a risk review on the property?" she asked. "Do it quietly," I told her. "And don't update contacts unless it's directly me." She agreed, and we ended the call. I stood in the kitchen a long time, hands on the chair. Fire had always seemed like ruin, chaos, and ending. But now, it felt like sharpness, like certainty. They thought I'd panic, scatter, and beg for help. That I'd sell for pennies just to be done. But I'd written every word of that clause with Martha after Henry died, back when I was terrified of losing everything. I had updated it 2 years ago when I saw them circling. They thought sentiment made me weak. They were wrong. That morning, I printed copies of the policy. the police report, the photos, and the notarized ownership papers. I mailed a packet to my lawyer. Another, smaller envelope went to my granddaughter. Not because she needed proof, but because I wanted her to remember. She was the only one who still asked how I was, the only one who still sent letters instead of abbreviations. Once, she asked me, "Grandma, what's the most powerful thing you've owned?" I told her paper. Now I was proving it. By evening, Martha emailed me confidential risk report. "Your account is flagged for protection. You qualify for full relocation coverage. Priority handling has been applied. No third-party contact without your direct voice authorization." I smiled. No fear, just reinforcement. They thought the fire would break me. Instead, it raised the value of my house and my position. They forgot who wrote the clause, and they underestimated who I still was. Later, there was a knock. A silhouette I knew, broad shoulders, brown uniform, familiar face. Deputy Marcus Reed. He'd once mowed lawns here as a boy. Now he wore a badge. "Morning, Mrs. Harper," he said, tipping his hat. "Come in, Marcus," I replied. Inside, his gaze swept the room. Cameras, papers, the calm way I moved. "Thank you for reporting," he said as I poured tea. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But I remembered what happens when you let things slide. People get burned." He nodded. "The fire didn't spread. Minimal damage. Logged as attempted arson. Property endangerment, trespassing. And suspects?" I asked. He hesitated, still reviewing. I looked him in the eye. "Marcus, you grew up in this backyard. You know who benefits if I'm gone." He didn't answer. "I'm not senile. I won't lie down quietly so someone else can profit." He reached into his pocket and set a melted lighter in a bag on the table. Black casing, gold trim. My breath caught. "Yes," I said. "It's my son's. A gift for his 21st birthday. Look, engraving at the bottom." The words were faint but still visible. "To William, light your own way." Grief and certainty hit me at once. "That doesn't prove it," Marcus said gently. "But it's important." "It's enough for me," I said. "File it. Not charges yet, but document it." When he left, he paused. "You're not what people expect." I smiled. "That's my advantage." I locked the door, drained the tea, and opened Henry's old desk. Inside lay the letter he wrote before he died. His words, "If they push, push back. You've always been more than they see." They'd set fire to my porch, but I had fire of my own, years of it. Neighbors began calling, then arriving with food. They'd heard whispers, they'd seen pressure before. Teresa's voice shook when she said, "You're not the first. They've done this to others." I didn't flinch, just filed it away. Another piece of proof. By nightfall, more women appeared, casseroles in hand. They looked at my locks, my cameras, my porch. One leaned close. "You need a lawyer who understands women like us," she whispered. "I know someone." She scribbled the name on a recipe card and slipped it into my hand before leaving. I held it tightly. They thought they could corner me. But I was gathering strength, one document, one neighbor, one truth at a time. That night, I called Miss Travers and told her about the women showing up with food and support. "They're gathering," I said, almost in disbelief. "Of course they are," she answered. "You're not the first woman in this town they've tried to push aside. But you might be the first to make them regret it." I liked that thought. The next morning, I met the woman June had recommended. Her office sat just outside town in a farmhouse turned legal practice. Her name was Delia Monroe. Silver hair, posture like steel, and a voice rough but warm. I gave her everything: documents, footage, the insurance clause, the lighter with the engraving, the pattern of harassment, notarized affidavits, the bank notices. She read silently, then finally said, "This is enough." "For court?" I asked. "For war," she replied. "But we'll start with court." Her certainty wasn't loud, but it was steady. I left with a folder in my hand and determination in my chest. Let them think I'm fragile. Let them think I'm past my prime. What I am is finished waiting. What I am is ready. And when the court date arrives, I won't show up as a victim. I'll walk in as the woman who lived here, loved here, buried her husband beneath the pine tree, and still wakes every day knowing who she is. They tried to turn me into an obstacle. They're about to face the answer. The smell of charred wood lingered longer than the damage. Even after repairs, sometimes the sun would warm the deck just right, and I'd catch a trace of it. I didn't mind. It reminded me of what I'd survived. The insurance payout came quickly. Martha made sure of that. Full rebuild or just restoration? She asked. Neither. I said. I want it better. She chuckled. That sounds like you. The contractors arrived, local men, neighbors, not the slick talkers my son used to hire. Before they began, I asked them to sit with me on the porch. I know what this house was, I told them. Now I need you to help me make it what it must be. They listened carefully. By the end of the week, the deck was rebuilt with fire-resistant wood, windows sealed, locks upgraded, cameras linked directly to my phone. But it wasn't just about defense. I had the old sunroom transformed into a writing nook. The walls painted a soft sky blue Henry would have loved. They thought fire would drive me out. Instead, it gave me reason to stay louder. Meanwhile, Delia worked methodically. First, a restraining order. Then, a civil suit fraud, attempted theft, property tampering. She delivered the papers herself. They came the next day, no smiles this time. She clutched the notice like it was poison. Is this really necessary? She asked. Yes, I said. And overdue? You're suing your son. She spat. No, I'm protecting myself from what he tried to steal. He stared at me like he didn't know me. I almost pitied him, but then I remembered the fire, the missing title, the lies. You caused this, he muttered. No, I said, stepping back. You did when you stopped seeing me as a person. And I shut the door. The house stood stronger than before, physically and spiritually. They tried to break something solid, but instead they pushed me to reinforce it with truth, dignity, and resilience. This wasn't renovation. It was reclamation. Every board now said, I am still here. The courthouse felt colder than I expected, not from the air, but the weight of it. I wore my navy coat with stitched cuffs, not for show, but because it made me feel like someone worth hearing. Delia walked steady at my side, case file in hand. My son sat across the room, silent. His wife's face was stiff, no longer smug. The judge, younger than I thought, listened carefully, not just to words, but pauses. Delia laid out the facts. Title transfers, missing paperwork, the lighter, the affidavits, the footage, and my statement. I didn't cry. I didn't waver. I spoke plainly. This home wasn't just bought. It was built with decades of marriage, illness, winters without enough heat, arguments and reconciliations, births and deaths, and now someone who never earned it tried to take it. I am not confused. I am not angry. I am not here for revenge. I am here for acknowledgement that what is mine cannot be rewritten. Silence filled the room. The judge ruled swiftly, restraining order upheld. Property confirmed, penalties applied. My son and his wife left without protest. He looked at me once like he wanted to speak. But he didn't. I didn't need him to. Walking out, I didn't feel triumphant, just steady. The rebuilt porch looked the same, but I knew it wasn't. The house and I had both changed. The quiet inside wasn't emptiness anymore. It was peace. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles, not pity. We began meeting over coffee, talking not of battles but of birds, recipes, and gardens. Life softened again. They thought I'd fold. They thought fire would erase me. But I stood inside the smoke with papers in my name, cameras running, and the law on my side. I didn't just keep my house. I kept myself. So if you're reading this, if someone ever tells you you're too old, too much, or no longer useful, remember this: they will try to take what you've built. Don't let them. Stand even in the fire. Make sure your name is on the deed. And when you've held your ground, tell another woman. Share the strength. Because this story isn't only mine. It belongs to every woman who refused to be erased. They tried to burn her down. She stood in the flames, and she won.